Have you ever asked yourself, I know how to jiggle peek, jump peek, and wide peek, but how the heck are my opponents still one-tapping me every single time I peek around a corner, and I don't even have a chance to fight them back? Well, sorry to break it to you, but what's the point of knowing how to do all those peeks if you don't know when to use those different types of peeks? Hey guys, it's Konpeki here, and in this video, I'll teach you guys the A.P.E method, which is a step-by-step process of elimination that I use to know how to peek every single angle in Valorant. And speaking of A.P.E, instead of investing into A.P.E JPEGs, if you're over 18 years old and are serious about improving in Valorant, come check out my 6-week accelerated coaching program that has a 5-division rank up guarantee in just 6 weeks. Spots are very limited, so make sure to apply as soon as possible. Now, stop real quick and imagine this. You install Word.exe and you're able to magically see where all your enemies are through the wall. Wouldn't that make it so much easier to know exactly where to be pre-aiming as you peek around a corner? Well, that's exactly what having good Gamesense and crosshair placement looks like. If you can predict where enemies will be the majority of the time, you'll be able to accurately pre-aim and confidently peek angles.
But Konpeki, how can I predict where people will be if I have negative 200 IQ and I can't focus on trying to guess where enemies are while trying to shoot?
Well, you're in luck, because your boy studied neuroscience at Berkeley, so I get it. We're actually all potatoes, and that's okay. It is scientifically proven that humans cannot focus on 2 things at once. So let's break down peeking into a step-by-step process. Step 1. Assess the angle that you're about to peek. There are common angles, off angles, and one last category of angles that I like to call roulette angles. As the name implies, common angles are angles that people tend to commonly peek from, and most of the time you're able to isolate these angles. Off angles are angles that players are less likely to peek or hold from in order to catch enemies off guard, and they're great for agents that have escape tools. And lastly, roulette angles are angles that are either impossible to isolate no matter how you position yourself, or they're angles that you have very little information about, so they're a gamble to peek. An example of this would be a one-and-done spot on A long in Haven, where if you try to peek behind the box, you're also exposing yourself to more angles on site. Another example would be on Split, when you're holding mid from B Heaven. Enemies can peek you from both the angle against the box, but also from close stairs. And one last example of a roulette angle would be when you're placed in a 1v2 scenario, and enemies could be pinching you from multiple sides. Now, once you've assessed what the angle you're about to peek is, step 2 is to prepare. You have to be mentally prepared and anticipate that an enemy could be holding the angle that you're about to peek. So, for common angles, generally, you can pre-aim them through the wall before you peek so that you can be ready to just click if you see the enemy. And the best way to peek common angles is to jiggle peek as far away as possible from the angle to decrease any angle advantage that the enemy might have. Since you'll most likely be peeking from a common angle as well, you want to jiggle peek so that you're not overcommitting to the fight if you whiff. If you think that the common angle is being held by an operator, you'll want to jump peek to bait out the op shot and get some info first. As a general rule of thumb, common angles are usually followed up by off angles. So after you've jiggled peek to clear common angles, you should immediately be ready to pre-aim the common off angles. Ideally, you'll also want to jiggle peek off angles behind some form of cover, like the angle against the wall in A main on Ascent. However, really good off angles require you to fully commit to clearing the angle by exposing yourself. So you should try to double swing with the teammate so you can trade each other.
It's all good. Let's all peek. You ready? Come here. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
With roulette angles, you should never put yourself in a situation where you have to dry peek them, which means just peeking without using any abilities. If it's a 50-50 chance that someone can be just on the right or left side, use a flash or a drone to clear them instead of using your own character model to clear them. Alright, now that you've mentally locked in, execute the peek with confidence. If you're mentally prepared to shoot before you execute the peek, you'll actually feel like your reaction time is so much faster. Really good pitchers in baseball make it very difficult for the batters to react to their pitch. This is because they make their pitches really unpredictable. If a professional batter knows exactly how fast a ball is being pitched, and if they know exactly where they need to swing, they're going to hit the ball 100% of the time. So it's literally the same thing when it comes to peeking with confidence. You can peek confidently because you did a quick mental due diligence of where there's a good chance the enemy could be. Okay, now that we went through all the steps, let me go through a perfect example of how Wardell uses the A.P.E method. As much as I said that you want to avoid roulette angles, sometimes they're just unavoidable when you're placed in a clutch scenario. But here's an example of Wardell 1v4ing the enemy team by using a combination of jump peeks and jiggle peeks to gain info about enemy positions and isolating each fight. Starting off the clip, Wardell gets the info about an enemy Skye on site with an Op. He pulls out his knives to move and clear angles faster compared to moving up with his Op. After the pick on Skye, he quickly jump peeks to get more info about backside, and then he gets the bomb down. In his head, he knows that during the 4 seconds that he was behind cover, enemies could have already been closing in on him from multiple sides. He tries to smoke off the recon dart, but it unfortunately scans him. However, he uses this to his advantage by assessing that the first angle that enemies could already be holding his position from is cave. So he prepares for an enemy to be there by pre-aiming cave, and he perfectly executes the peek. Right after the kill, he immediately jump peeks the right side again to see if anyone is pushing him on the right. Because he doesn't see anyone on the right side, by process of elimination, he pre-aims his op towards mid door where there's now a high chance an enemy could be pushing from. After killing Sova, he peeks right side again, but this time he can afford to peek a little wider to check switch because now it's a 1v1 and he has his dash available. Because he doesn't see anyone, and with the time ticking down, the next spot he has to check again is mid door or cave. And as soon as he turns around to check, the Viper peeks him from shop, so he repositions himself to hold a very tight angle where he will have the advantage with the op. What Wardell just pulled off is insanely hard to do when you're under a lot of pressure, but a good way to practice the A.P.E method is by playing deathmatch more regularly to start understanding how to peek angles differently in each gunfight scenario. Don't just mindlessly play it, but before every angle that you peek, try to assess what the angle that you're peeking is, prepare how you're going to peek that angle, and practice executing the peek with confidence. Now, up to this part of the video, I covered just the very basics of how to implement the A.P.E method with just the 3 most common types of peeks. Now, it's about to get a lot more interesting as I cover the slight nuances and variations of peeks that Radiant players incorporate. During the assessment and preparation phase, there's 3 different questions you should really ask yourself. Do I have a timing advantage, an information advantage, or an ability advantage? Timing advantages are all about peeking enemies when they're least expecting you to peek. Information advantages are about peeking enemies when you have info about where they are. And lastly, as the name implies, ability advantages are peeking enemies with an advantage that your ability creates in a gunfight. If you can identify even one of these advantages before you peek, it won't be a 50-50 fight anymore, and it's like having a Blue Eyes White Dragon card in your hands. But let's say you have all 3 of these checkboxes crossed off, then you can summon the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon card for a play that'll literally end the round for the enemy team. So, here's an example of me playing Sova against C9 Kyo on my alt account. I first get an information advantage when my dart scans 2 enemies backside. I have information of where they are, but they don't know where I am. So with this info, I actually decide to peek instead of sitting back to create a timing advantage. After getting scanned, Jet has to worry about getting peeked from any angle on site, so that's when I decide to peek. After the kill, I know that the chamber was still CT, and is most likely pushing out with Jet to try and trade her. With this prior info, I use my shock dart to create all 3 types of advantages. I shoot the shock dart into CT, which leaves chamber with only 2 options. Either move to his right to dodge it, or take the full 90 damage from the shock dart. Now, because I know that he's most likely going to move to dodge the dart, I have the information advantage that the only place I need to peek is a CT pocket. I also have a timing advantage because if Chamber is moving to dodge the dart, I know that his gun will be inaccurate when I peek him. So now you might be wondering, what should I do if I don't have a clear advantage over the enemy? So this is where you can start to play some mind games. Let's say that the enemies have a gun advantage over the angle you're about to peek, like with an operator. If they're posted up long range, then you would want to shoulder peek or jump peek to bait out a shot before peeking wide. But if you know they're posted up close, you can wide peek because their screen will be zoomed in, so you'll appear much faster on the screen. In another example, let's say that you know where an enemy is, but they also know where you are. So it's a fair 50-50 fight. What you can do is shoulder peek a little to bait out some shots, and combine it with a wide peek to throw off their crosshair placement. Because they already took a few shots, even if they perfectly flick to your head as you wide peek, their bullets might not be 100% accurate, so you're actually creating the advantage. And finally, let's say that an enemy could be holding a close angle on you and you want to peek them. This is when crouch peeking is super useful because it can really throw off the enemy's crosshair placement. When you crouch peek, just make sure to account for the fact that your crosshair will move down as you crouch. So if you crouch too often in your fights and you notice that you're whiffing, it's probably because you're not accounting for the fact that you have to readjust your crosshair higher as you crouch. Well, that pretty much sums up everything that I wanted to cover in this video. And if you thought this video was helpful, come join my Discord server where I give away even more free training resources. And please like the video and subscribe to the channel so more people can watch my videos. And it also helps me post out even more content for you guys. And as always, thanks for watching.